Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to our channel Era Islamic Abrahamic Wisdom. Today, we're starting a new series based on Mr. Zahir Ahmad Mir's fantastic book, The Foundation of Islamic Jurisprudence. We're jumping right into Volume 1, Sub-Volume 3, which focuses on the time of Umar ibn al-Khattab. We're going to explore a moment that seems small on the surface, but is actually huge. It's about how a simple change in a leader's title wasn't just about words, it was a revolutionary act that helped build the very foundations of an Islamic state. So let me ask you this. How can a single title, just a few words, actually define a nation? It sounds a little strange, right? I mean, it's just a name. But what we're going to see is that a title can be so much more. It can be a blueprint, a foundation, a declaration of what a government is and what it isn't. This is the central question we're going to unpack today, and the answer is a masterclass in political genius. Now, to really get the weight of this moment, you have to picture the scene. After the death of the Prophet, peace be upon him, the Muslim community was expanding at a mind-boggling speed. What had been a close-knit community in Arabia was, in the blink of an eye, becoming this huge, sprawling, multinational state. And while that's an incredible success story, it's also the recipe for a crisis. Suddenly, you have to ask questions nobody had to ask before. How do you govern all these different peoples? How do you command armies on multiple fronts, hundreds of miles apart? The old ways just weren't going to cut it anymore.
Let's just quickly look at the timeline. Of course, it all begins with the Prophet, the founder of the community. His first successor, Abu Bakr, did an incredible job holding everything together against some really serious threats. But by the year 13 Hijri, or 634 CE, Umar ibn al-Khattab steps into leadership, and the entire situation has changed. The sheer size of the state had revealed this massive constitutional problem that was kind of hiding in plain sight. Something had to be done, and it had to be done fast.
So what was the problem? Well, it started with the title. Abu Bakr's title was Khalīfat Rasūlillāh. It means successor of the messenger of God. And for him, it was perfect. It was simple, it was direct, and it clearly defined his role. He was the one continuing the mission of the Prophet. It was a title based on a personal succession, a direct link. But that very personal nature of the title was about to become a serious roadblock. Right, so think about it. If Abu Bakr was the successor of the messenger of God, what does that make Umar? Logically, he would be the successor of the messenger of God. I mean, you can already hear how clunky and impractical that is. Now imagine the third leader or the fourth. The title would become this ridiculously long chain. But the problem wasn't just that it was a mouthful. That was just the symptom. The real issue was much, much deeper. And this, right here, this is the heart of the whole matter. A title like successor of the successor points to a system of personal inheritance. It ties all the authority to a person's relationship with the guy before him. And if you follow that logic, you end up with something that looks a lot like a monarchy, a system based on lineage. But what this new massive state actually needed was institutional continuity. It needed an office, a permanent position, with powers defined by law that exists no matter who is sitting in the chair. And this is where we see Umar's incredible foresight. The solution he came up with was just elegant, powerful, and it changed everything. He adopted a brand new title, Amir al-Mu'mineen. It translates to Commander of the Faithful. Now, this was not just changing his nameplate, this was a total redefinition of leadership. It created an office, a role, that was totally separate from the man who held it. So let's break down what this one change actually accomplished, because it set off 3 constitutional innovations almost immediately. First, it put the authority in the office, not the person. The role of the Amir was now a permanent fixture of the state. Second, this title was for the future. It created stability because now everyone knew what the next leader and the one after that would be called. No more confusion. And third, it unified the civil and military power under one legal authority, which is absolutely essential if you want to govern a massive, expanding territory. And this new office wasn't just symbolic. It came with a very clear job description. As the supreme executive, the Emir was in charge of the day-to-day administration of the state. As the top military commander, he had the final say on the armies. But here's the really brilliant part, the nuance. He had judicial oversight, meaning he could appoint judges, but he did not have judicial control. He couldn't tell them how to rule. This established a very early, very important principle of judicial independence. So what's the big takeaway from all of this? It's that this one decision, This one title change created the concept of a permanent executive office. It was a massive paradigm shift, moving away from this idea of a temporary personal successor to a durable permanent institution of the state. Honestly, this is a cornerstone of governance that you can see in constitutions all over the world today. It was a foundational moment that established leadership as a public trust, governed by law, not by bloodline. And that's why this quote from the source material is just so perfect. This was not cosmetic. It was a constitutional innovation. It hits the nail on the head. This wasn't about finding a shorter, catchier title. This was about building the legal and political architecture for a state that could last for centuries, a state that was governed by principles, not just by powerful personalities. The title Amir al-Mu'mineen literally helped forge a state from a community. It really makes you think, doesn't it? What other single words? Words like president, Caesar, or king have built, defined, or even torn down entire empires throughout history. If you found this explainer insightful, please subscribe to our channel, give this video a like, and please share it with your friends. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next with this big question. Can a simple title really change the course of history? I mean, think about it. Can a name, just a name for a leader, do more than just describe them? Could it actually define and maybe even limit their power? And by doing that, shape the entire destiny of a civilization? Well, as we're about to find out, the answer is a huge, resounding yes. We are talking about a title that was chosen not to make a man more powerful, but to elevate a system of law above that man. Now, this was an absolutely radical idea for its time, and as we'll see, it echoes in ways that are more relevant today than you can even imagine. Okay, let's jump right into our first section, a revolutionary title. To really get why this was such a big deal, we have to kind of transport ourselves back in time. We need to understand the immense, almost state-breaking challenges the early Muslim community was up against at this very moment. Just try to picture this. In just a few years, the state had absolutely exploded. I mean, it stretched across incredibly diverse places: Iraq, Syria, Egypt, all across Arabia. Now, this amazing success was also a huge crisis waiting to happen. The state could have easily shattered into a dozen pieces. How do you possibly govern all these different peoples and cultures? The personal charm of one leader, or the old, deep-seated tribal loyalties, those systems were just not going to cut it anymore. They were buckling under the strain. Something new, something unifying, was desperately needed. And this is where the genius of the solution really shines. Hazrat Umar adopts the title Amir al-Mu'mineen, which means Commander of the Faithful. Now listen, this wasn't just a fancy new name. This was a complete reimagining of what leadership was. In a world of all-powerful kings and emperors, this title was a clear rejection of that model. It created something brand new, a constitutional office, where the leader was its very first servant, not its master. This brings us straight to our second section, where we're going to see exactly how this new office was built, from the ground up to put limits on power. This wasn't just for show. This had huge, real-world consequences for how every single part of the state was run. Okay, now this slide right here, this is where that massive shift just snaps right into focus. Look at the left side. Personality-based rule. That was the norm everywhere. The king is the law, his authority is absolute, and power gets passed down to his kids. Simple. But now, look at the right side. Law-based governance. All of a sudden, the ruler is subject to the law, just like everybody else. His authority doesn't come from his family tree, it comes from the consent of the people. This wasn't just a small change, this was a full-blown revolution in political thinking. So here's the kicker. Accountability wasn't just some nice idea, it was literally baked into the job description. I mean, look at this. The leader could be publicly criticized. Any citizen could take him to court. He could actually be removed from his job for being unjust. The system completely rejected the whole idea of an infallible ruler with a divine right to do whatever he wanted. But wait a minute. Creating a new office like this, something that had never existed before, that raised a very serious religious question. And that brings us to Section 3. Was this a brilliant new institution, or was it a forbidden innovation? And you have to understand, this was a really serious charge. In Islam, the core beliefs and the ways you worship, the absolute pillars of the faith, they're fixed. You don't change them. So the question on everyone's mind was, is creating this new political office messing with the fundamentals of the religion? Is it a prohibited innovation, what's known as a bid'ah?
And the answer, from the scholars of Islamic law, was a clear and definite no. The reason is all about this fundamental distinction you see right here. On the left, you have religious doctrine. That's belief, that's worship. It comes from divine revelation, and it does not change. But on the right, you have administrative mechanisms. These are the methods of governing, and they are meant to be adaptive. They can and they should evolve to meet the needs of the time, as long as their ultimate goal is to uphold the principles of the faith.
And that is precisely what was happening. Hazrat Umar wasn't changing the religion. He was creating a new administrative tool, a new system, specifically to protect these core Islamic values you see here. Adl, which is justice, amana, the sacred trust that comes with leadership, and maslaha, which means the public interest. The how of governing was new, but the why was rooted in these timeless, unchangeable principles. In fact, this whole framework was seen as a direct way to put foundational commands from the Quran into action, like this incredibly powerful verse about handling trusts properly and judging with justice. So the office of Amir al-Mu'minin wasn't just a clever political idea. It was understood as a practical way to fulfill a divine command. So we've talked about the theory, we've talked about the religious justification, but what was the actual on-the-ground impact of creating this law-bound office? Let's dive into the constitutional legacy.
The effect was immediate, and it was absolutely dramatic. That crisis of the expanding state? It was solved. Every diverse province was now unified under a single constitutional authority. This made it possible to have fair, standardized rules for everyone, and crucially, it broke the back of the old system of tribal politics. Your leadership wasn't based on your family name anymore. It was based on your duty to the law.
But the long-term legacy? Well, that's even more profound. And this part is truly incredible. This one decision basically established a form of executive constitutionalism, the idea that even the head of state is bound by a higher law. It created a clear line between the office of the ruler and the person who happens to be in that office, and it cemented the ideas that leadership has to follow the law and shouldn't be passed down like a family heirloom. Just pause and let that sink in for a second. This idea of institutional continuity, the concept that stable institutions, not just charismatic people, are what give a state its strength and its ability to last, that's a cornerstone of modern political science. And here it was being deliberately put into practice in the 7th century. It is a truly remarkable moment in history. Okay, so this is all fascinating history, but let's pull it right into the 21st century. Why does a decision made over 1,400 years ago have anything to teach us about the world we're living in right now? It matters because this model gives us a powerful, historically proven alternative to so many of the political problems we see all over the world today. We live in an age of personality cults where leaders are treated like they can do no wrong, of dynastic politics where power is just a family business, and of rulers who use any crisis to grab absolute authority. This history reminds us there has always been another way.
And this right here, this is the core takeaway of this entire explainer. If you remember one thing, let it be this. According to this foundational model, authentic Islamic governance is not about a powerful strongman who stands above the law. It's about building strong, resilient, and just institutions that can hold any leader accountable. The system is designed to be stronger than any one person.
Hazrat Umar's authority didn't come from fear, it didn't come from force, and it didn't come from his bloodline. As Mr. Mir puts it so perfectly in his book, he ruled by constitutional design. His power came from and was limited by a carefully built law-based system that he himself was the first to swear to protect. And so that's where we'll leave it. With this question, not just for leaders, but for every single one of us to think about. In a world that is still fighting against the abuse of power and for justice, what timeless, practical lessons can we learn from this 7th century masterclass in accountability and the rule of law? The answers, it turns out, might be more relevant now than they have ever been.